the Enlightened Education Podcast, Episode 1. Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Enlightened Education. I'm your host, Caitlin Chumbley, and I'm thrilled to finally be able to start this podcast so I can spread knowledge pertaining to children and education. A little bit about myself: I'm from Austin, Texas, and just graduated from UT with a BS in Applied Learning and Development and a minor in Childhood Studies. I have volunteered as a mentor and tutor at various elementary schools in the Austin area, and have worked as a nanny for 9 years. Being around children and learning how they learn and develop has always been a passion of mine, and I want to share with everyone these things I have learned through my education. So I hope this podcast will be useful and informative not only for parents and families of young children, but for anyone involved in the educational system or medical and health industry who encounter children on a regular basis. So now that you all know who you're listening to, we can get things started. Today, I'll be discussing a topic that is not usually addressed in most educational settings: the representation of death in Disney films. Now, we all know that Disney movies play a large role in most children's lives. Kids love movies, and parents love when their kids watch movies because it usually means they get some downtime. It's Friday night, the kids are rambunctious, mom and dad are exhausted from the long work week, so they sit the kids on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, pop in Snow White, and they're set for the next 2 hours. Now, I'm not a parent myself, but having worked as a nanny for several years, I get it. It's easy to want to just occupy your kids with a movie to just get them quiet down for a little bit. But what most parents and kids don't realize is that many Disney movies are thematically organized around death and dying. In Gary Lauderman's article, The Disney Way of Death, Lauderman writes, "The presence of death in his films is so significant in this regard because these representations convey moral teachings about so many of the essentials of life. And what is most striking, though not surprising, about these films is that for many stories, death, or the threat of death, is the motor, the driving force that enlivens each narrative." Lauderman continues his in-depth analysis of death in Disney movies by explaining that these movies are a direct reflection of the American cultural religion of the 20th century. He quotes, "In addition, the preoccupation with the individual encounter with death, the impact of death in family members, and the optimistic view that death can be overcome found in most of these films offered Americans in the first half of the 20th century an accessible, generally Christian and broadly American, religious views that avoided fundamentalist, apocalyptic scenarios on the one hand and abstruse theological reflections on the other." Now, Lauderman makes a good argument here. He provides a relevant historical background as to why Disney movies inaccurately portray death. However, Lauderman fails to address a huge factor in his argument that kind of takes away from some of its effectiveness: Disney's audience. While most Disney movies are intended for all ages to enjoy, it's not adults filling up the theaters to watch the latest Disney releases, it's young children. According to the Walt Disney Company, as stated on their website, Disney movies are designed to capture the attention of children as young as 5 years old. But let me ask you, do you think a 5-year-old is going to comprehend the underlying messages about life and death that Lauderman claims Disney movies promote? I'm thinking no. In fact, in 1972, Perry Childers and Mary Wimmer conducted a study at the University of Wisconsin considering the correlation between the concept of death and child development. They were looking to determine children's understanding of the universality and irrevocability of death as unrelated to age. The study involved 75 children between the ages of 4 and 10 and recorded the children's responses to a set of discussion-based questions about death and what it means to them. Childers and Wimmer's results did not support their hypothesis and further concluded that cognitive awareness of death does not occur until age 9. So, to connect the dots, Disney movies serve as an unrealistic guide to misunderstanding death to an audience who is cognitively unaware of what death really means. This can be problematic and confusing for young children should they ever have to deal with death in the real world. Meredith Cox, Aaron Garrett, and James Graham from the College of New Jersey suggest that Disney films be used as an aid to introduce the concept of death to its viewers, rather than merely for entertainment purposes, an idea that I completely agree with and support. In their study of death in Disney films, which looked at 23 death scenes from 10 Disney films, 39% of the films they viewed left death unacknowledged. To me, that sounds like a large portion of death scenes lacking emotion, something that kids shouldn't be taught. Death is everywhere. There's no avoiding it, and it's just a part of life. Grieving and emotions are also a huge part of it, and children should be aware of that. Even if they don't fully grasp this concept, it's important to encourage healthy and open discussion, and Disney films can become an easily accessible tool to help foster these ideas. Now, I want to take a moment here to mention an article I found online that was published in the Buffalo News a while back. It's an anecdote from a man named Don Esmond about him and his 7-year-old daughter going to see Tarzan in the theater. At the end of the movie, his daughter's in tears over the death of the gorilla herd's main leader. She asks him, "Why is it so sad?" as she sobs. Esmond continues to question Disney's content, arguing that some of their movies may be a little too grim. But his story serves as a great example of how Disney movies can be used to introduce the concept of death and dying. Some people might believe that because children are unable to fully understand the concept of death and dying, that they shouldn't bother teaching it to them. But my question to them is, why withhold information from a child just because they can't fully comprehend it? Children are going to encounter death in various ways, whether it be in movies or on TV, or a family member or a pet dying. And it can be beneficial to learn what it means and how to deal with death before they actually encounter it. So, I want to encourage all of my listeners to take advantage of opportunities to engage in open discussions with their children about death and dying, because hey, knowledge is power. That sums up today's episode. I want to thank you for listening to Enlightened Education. Please tune in next week for episode 2.